You're not going to deter anyone in Moscow, let alone Vladimir Putin, by spending £4 billion of British taxpayers' money on a tank that doesn't work.
Boris Johnson is going to visit Sweden and Finland to discuss the war in Ukraine today. Both countries are considering joining NATO. The Russian invasion of Ukraine is a reminder of the risks and responsibilities which come with membership of that alliance, and our armed forces might actually lack the modern battle-winning capabilities they would need for any future warfare. That's the warning from the Public Accounts Committee, and Mark Francois is the Conservative MP who sits on the committee. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
We've reported, you must have seen for almost your whole parliamentary career, the MOD has a shocking problem with procurement. They spend an awful lot of money and they don't often get a very good return for that. Why is it, do you think?
Well, one of the things that we reveal in our report today, remember the Public Accounts Committee is an all-party committee with a Labour chairman, the redoubtable Meg Hillier, is that MOD officials are still in denial that they have a serious problem with the way that they conduct their procurement activity. We produced a report last autumn that said that the MOD's procurement system is broken. And the one that we've come out with today essentially says that it's still broken and things will not improve until the Ministry of Defence themselves admit that they have a very serious problem, which they undoubtedly do.
And what is the problem? Because, I mean, lots of government departments spend lots of money and you know, they have to use technology. And I know the army or the military rather are always trying to rely on technology and they have to rely on external companies. But where does the difficulty come? Can you find an obvious place where it's going wrong?
In a nutshell, the system is extremely bureaucratic and slow moving. Of the MOD's top 36 procurement programs, from Dreadnought, the new nuclear submarines, downwards, not a single program is running completely to time and cost. Not one out of 36. Now, any private sector business that behaved in that way, you would say straight away was a failure. So, for instance, we've spent nearly £4 billion on a new light tanker reconnaissance vehicle called Ajax. Yeah. Which after many years of effort still doesn't work properly and may even have to be scrapped. Now, you're not going to deter anyone in Moscow, let alone Vladimir Putin, by spending £4 billion of British taxpayers' money on a tank that doesn't work. Now, the other thing that we really stressed in the report this morning is that the war in Ukraine gives added urgency to putting these systems right. That the whole procurement system needs wholesale reform, and it's even more important to do that given that there is now a major conflagration on the European landmass, and our contribution to NATO depends on our armed forces having modern, effective kit that is delivered to time and cost and could do the job if asked to do so. So we are undermining our commitment to NATO, unfortunately, by not being able to sort out the problems in our own procurement chain. And that is a very serious matter.
Would you say that if the procurement problems get sorted, we still need to spend more money? I mean, to be a part of NATO, you're supposed to spend 2%. Would you go more?
Well, I would. But the first thing to do is to achieve better value for money from the money that you're already spending. So put that right, and then hopefully top up the budget and spend that effectively too. Another example, Dreadnought, the renewal of the nuclear deterrent, fundamental to our national security, our ultimate insurance policy, if you like. It's £31 billion for the system, but there's also a contingency of a further 10 billion. And the report shows that the MOD have already spent over £1 billion of that contingency, and the submarines are still a decade away. So in simple terms, if you can't control the spending on the biggest procurement program that you have, which is Dreadnought, what hope for being able to control it properly on the others?
Not least as well when we're talking. I mean, you'll be very conscious of this with what your constituents are telling you. You know, we're facing a recession. We've learned that today. We've got a cost of living crisis, rampant inflation, and when you start talking about money like $4 billion on tanks that may never work, that's a lot. That's money that could be spent better.
Well, absolutely right. And another thing that we that we highlight in the report today is that in some critical areas of technology, we're falling behind. There are, unfortunately, reports overnight that the Russians have used hypersonic missiles that can travel at up to 5 times the speed of sound to attack targets in the port city of Odessa. We have an Anglo-French program to develop these types of weapons, but it's a decade away from entering service, while the Russians were using a comparable system literally last night. So not only are we falling behind in some critical areas of technology, but also some of the kit we're bringing in is coming in too late and it doesn't always work properly. So we've really got to improve on this, and the war in Ukraine is a massive wake-up call for the MOD. If you accept, as I would argue, that the first duty of government above all others is the defence of the realm, then we're spending over £40 billion a year of British taxpayers' money on that critical requirement, but we're not spending it effectively. And if you believe that the role of armed forces is to deter war by persuading a potential aggressor that they can't hope to win, then you must have battle-winning armed forces. Our armed forces in the UK, compared to most of our international equivalents, are arguably the best in the world. They're certainly up there in the top 3, but they're only as effective, not just as the brilliant people that we have, but the kit that they use. The people aren't the problem. The problem is the kit.
Yeah, just another issue, Mark Francois. You're a big advocate of Brexit, have always been. The government signed the Brexit agreement, including the Northern Ireland Protocol, in good faith. It hasn't worked. We kind of knew it probably wasn't going to work. Is it acceptable for the British government unilaterally to scrap it?
If ultimately necessary, yes. Why? Because the protocol was always intended to be temporary. There's a great deal of talk about Article 16, but the key article is Article 13.8, which says that the protocol can be replaced by superior arrangements. And I believe that those are now available. So we've been trying to negotiate in good faith with the EU for well over a year on this. They've given barely an inch on any of it. If they continue to be intransigent, in order to uphold the Good Friday Agreement, we may have to legislate unilaterally. Now, I read in the papers that the Foreign Secretary is meeting Mr. Šefčovič probably tomorrow. Perhaps the fact that we are contemplating unilaterally legislating will focus his mind. But if it doesn't, we do have the legal powers now in Parliament to legislate unilaterally. And if the EU won't be reasonable, I believe we should use those critically in order to uphold the Good Friday Agreement, on which the whole peace process in Northern Ireland is based.
Just finally, though, is this the time to be engaging in a trade war? Because what could happen if you do that is that the EU respond. We've got this recession, potentially. We've got inflation. We've got a cost of living crisis. We've got all sorts of problems coming out of Russia, including energy problems. If you threw into that mix a trade war within you, would that not be irresponsible at this time?
Well, we're not seeking a trade war. It would only be the EU that sought that. They could seek to withdraw from the trade and cooperation agreement that we signed with them, but that would require unanimity among the nations of the European Union. And I don't believe that some of the Eastern European states, given how well we've done on the Ukraine, would want to go along with such action. Look, we all want to solve this by negotiation, but you get to a point where if the other side of negotiation simply isn't giving any ground at all, then you have to do something different. And the unionist community in Northern Ireland clearly have withdrawn their support from the protocol. And the risk is, if the EU continue to be intransigent, that could lead to the collapse of the Good Friday Agreement itself on the EU's watch. We simply cannot allow a return to violence in Northern Ireland. Hopefully we moved on from that. We want to go forwards and not backwards.